Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to night 5 of the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini-series. Tonight is all about speckles. We needed a speckle rainbow to round out these mini skein painting rainbows dyeing series. Tonight we are going to combine our more traditional rainbow colors that we used back in night 3 with those neon fluorescent colors that we used in nights 1 and 2 to create dimension and depth and a play on, I guess, classic and neon for all of these colors. If you are enjoying this series, please make sure you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. There are still going to be 2 more videos in the Spring Mini Skein mini-series, a full skein dyeing video tomorrow night, and then the next night a vlog that'll go a little bit behind the scenes for the whole series, and you don't want to miss it. And plus, subscribing is the biggest way you can help support the content here. But now, let's go look at the 12 colors we'll be using tonight. We are going to use 12 different colors for this set. All of these are Dharma acid dyes. And for our reds, we've got Cherry Bomb and Fluorescent Fuchsia. For orange, Blazing Orange and Fluorescent Safety Orange. Yellow, Brilliant Yellow and Fluorescent Lemon. Green, Emerald Green and Radioactive. Blue, Extreme Blue and Frozen Blue. And purple, we will use Royal Purple and Purple Pop. With the exception of the Frozen Blue, these other more neon colors tend to spread a fair amount and so could result in having a wash of color on the backdrop. I have speckled with Cherry Bomb before and that worked pretty well. Emerald Green may also spread a bit, but if we have a lower volume of water, then it should stay put. But I think I'm going to start with the greens so that way I can get a feel of the character of the yarn to know how things may want to shift around. But I'm excited to play with these like 2 rainbow palettes that we have used over the course of the series on one set. I have pre-soaked all of our 20-gram mini skeins in some plain tap water overnight. There are a lot of different yarn bases in here. All of them are from Wool to Dye For, and all of them are superwash. But the specific bases are Titanium Sock, That Yak, the Superwash MCN High Twist, Sheila's Glitter with the Gold Selena, and Crazy 8. A lot of these will absorb speckles somewhat similarly, and because we're dyeing them all in a single pan, we may or may not see differences between the different fiber contents, but it is always fun for me to see how a similar colorway looks on different bases. And I really enjoy doing these side-by-side comparisons as part of the Spring Mini Skein mini-series. I am going to be speckling on our yarn using my gloved fingertips with dry dye powder. And so I will be wearing a deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves while I am doing the speckling. But during the process, I'll also end up with pigment on my gloved fingertips. So I have some yarn mops here where I can wipe my gloves onto them, creating some fun random colorways to go along with it. Here soaking, I have some Knit Picks Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino, in some water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And then once I have applied dye all over it, then I will steam set it for at least 30 minutes. I'm pre-soaking 200 grams. I don't know if I'm going to use both with all 12 colors, but we'll see how things go and how the colors spread on them. But I figured having 2 yarn mops ready to go was a good plan. In my 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan, I am going to arrange 300 grams of our mini skeins, and I am going to try to spread them out as much as possible. Now, unlike a skein of yarn that isn't minis, you can see that as I spread, and that yak makes it easy to see, some may be completely beneath like other skeins. And even then when we flip, well, maybe more is exposed, but maybe not. So we will likely need to do more than just one flip, so that way we can get some amount of coverage on all of the yarn. Here I have a container with 8 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. This is the first acid I have added to the yarn. And I'm adding just enough so that way we can have enough water to start heating things up. And I did squeeze out a lot of the pre-soak. And so what I want to see is that when I squeeze down, I want to see some of that water there in the corners, but also when I move it, I want there to be enough water so that way there is still some there, so that way when we have the heat on, we won't risk burning anything, but we still have our yarn very much at the surface. So I've probably added between 5 to 6 cups. Yeah, I've added a little over 5 cups of that water mixture I talked about, and I have a turkey baster here, so as time goes on I will add water to the edges. But now let's start heating things up, and I am going to put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves so we can start speckling. With so little water, things heat up pretty quickly. I reduced the heat to low. And let's start off with the emerald green. And I am going to take this and making sure some definitely lands on our yak. And just speckling across with my fingertips, knowing that there will be some spread here. We are not going to have the sharpest speckles. I'm now coming in with the Radioactive. If I wanted the speckles to be sharper, then I could have mixed the dye with citric acid powder, but we aren't doing that here. And it's not necessarily going to be like a every other color kind of situation, but it may be. And the one I'm paying extra attention to making sure some color lands on it is that yak. But in some places the colors kind of go over each other, in some places they don't. And we might do things differently on the other side, but now I want to let this first round of color set on the yarn. And just so you can see, our yarn mop is starting to get some color as I wipe off my fingertips. The one other tip I will give is you want your fingertips to be dry before going into the dye container, so that way the powder can really strike well. But I'm going to turn the heat back up to medium heat and heat this for 10 minutes before we flip things. Okay, I am going to flip the yarn so we can start adding color to the other side. And the goal with this flip is to arrange things, because we've got so many minis in here. The goal is to arrange things so that way we see the least amount of color already. But now we're going to keep speckling. While I was speckling, I tried to really only apply a little bit of each of the colors, understanding that the emerald green is one I know spreads, and Radioactive and a lot of the other fluorescents spread as well. I waited at least 10 minutes in between each flip to try to allow the colors as much time as possible to set. When I opened the skeins up to reveal the inside, the area that was hidden, I was pleased to see a reasonable amount of color coverage present already. And so with the last round of speckles, I just went really lightly on areas where I felt like I needed a little bit more color. But overall, the greens went pretty quickly. It has been 10 minutes and I am pleased with the coverage that we have here, doing far fewer flips than I might have thought. Now, I know that as I flip again, I'm not planning on adding more color, but I know that there was some powder potentially on the other side, so I did want to flip it to allow that wet powder to get some more water. But now I'm also going to come in and add the remaining water from our initial 8 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. And just make sure that things are like nice and tapped in, so that way if there's any color that hadn't set all the way, it now has a chance to do so. And I'm going to heat the yarn for an additional 20 to 30 minutes to allow the color to finish setting. But you can always take a peek with a little spoon. I see a hint of some green, but the deeper greens do seem, yeah, there's a hint over there. But yeah, I think things are going to be pretty well set in that period of time. It's now time to remove our yarn and set it aside to cool so we can wash it and reset for our next color. And I will probably need to start with fresh water for each colors just to avoid any potential color transfer, but I also will want to wipe down the sides of the pan because there may be little bits of color that we do not want in there. I am expecting that we will see some amount of contrast between our brilliant yellow and fluorescent lemon, but I'm not expecting it to feel quite as speckly as the green, just because these are colors where yellow doesn't have a lot of contrast with bare white, and so I expect it just won't feel quite the same, but hopefully we will get a similar effect. I reset the pot using a new mixture of 8 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and started speckling the yellow dye, waiting 10 minutes in between each flip. Technically, both fluorescent lemon and brilliant yellow are primary yellow colors, and the fluorescent lemon is a little bit more cool toned. But even knowing that, I was surprised how distinct they looked on the yarn. I mean, I shouldn't have been that surprised because I have used both of these powders before, and I knew the hues were different, but it was still nice to see that when speckling, I could see and feel both of those colors in there, and they didn't disappear. Once I was satisfied with the color coverage on the yellow, once again I added a little bit more water to make sure all the powder was well dissolved and give the yarn a little bit more space to move around, and then let it heat for a total of 30 minutes from the last time I added dye. And then we reset to go on to our next color. Resetting the pot with new water and everything, just because since we're leaving some of that bare yarn visible in each of these cases, we don't want there to be any transfer of yellow onto the orange, even if one of our oranges does break a tiny bit yellow. It wouldn't have been the end of the world, but I do want to try to keep each set within the 2 color family that I'm trying to use. I continued to move through the rest of the colors, starting with the orange. And because the yellow actually did show some nice contrast between the neon and less neon hue, I was very optimistic with how the rest of the colors would come out. And I followed the same general recipe as I layered on the colors. There was enough color on my fingertips with each round that I did go ahead and steam set the mop multiple times in between batches, just so that way there would be enough yarn that could really wipe the color off of my fingers without just transferring it around and being messy. In powder form, the 2 shades of orange looked pretty similar on the yarn itself. This was a little bit surprising to me because I know the finished colors are fairly distinct. Fluorescent Safety Orange is super neon, and it does break a little bit with some yellow halos. So I was expecting to see with the powder some more of those lighter yellow hues. But those did start to come out more as we flipped the yarn and the dye sort of like spread and settled and struck onto the yarn. And I have a feeling that some of that contrast will be a little bit more dramatic once the yarn is dry. When I started speckling for our pinkish colorway with the Cherry Bomb and Fluorescent Fuchsia, here we had a lot more contrast. And actually, if I go back to the very beginning and look at the little paint swatches from Dharma of each of the colors, the oranges and yellows are a lot closer to one another than the other colors. I think we'll see a lot more contrast in the colors that we have from here on out. Now, while speckling this colorway, I didn't know how much that bright pink, that primary color in the fluorescent fuchsia that can be such a bleeder, may or may not spread out onto the yarn. And if it would sort of overtake and overwhelm the entire colorway. It did spread, and we do have sort of a pastel pink character to it, but you definitely can feel where these fluorescent pink speckles are located onto the yarn. And I know that this is going to pair super well with the other colors. And there's one other thing that I'm especially excited about with this set. In a lot of the other videos I've done where I've done rainbows with neon fluorescent colors, I have commented on how fluorescent fuchsia and purple pop are really super similar to each other. Yes, fluorescent fuchsia is a brilliant fluorescent bright pink, and purple pop, it's still very pinkish. It's a very warm purple, a very pinkish purple. But when we mix that fluorescent fuchsia with the cherry bomb, that brought things even more into our red category. And mixing the purple pop with the royal purple brought more blue into it, making these speckled colorways and the combinations here very distinct in a way that's different from what we have done previously. The other thing I really liked about combining these neon fluorescent colors with a, I guess, more classic version of the color is that not just the contrast we see between them, but since fluorescent colors spread a lot more, we did get a little bit of, not sharp, but sharper speckles with the other color, which again just adds fun and sort of speckle and modeling to these colorways. Finally, we have our blue colorway, and I'm using frozen blue, even though through the course of the series I've sort of felt like I should maybe swap to Caribbean blue from frozen blue. I haven't checked to see if the Caribbean blue pigments are what is in frozen blue, but frozen is not a very pigmented color. It is a very nice bright blue, so it works really well, and I do really enjoy it. But going forward, I wonder if Caribbean will give us more of that neon, like, brightness punch to it. Extreme blue has been a favorite blue of mine for a while and is incredibly pigmented. These two blues played off each other super well, giving us some gorgeous contrast. And they both did spread a little bit. And I like that in the pastel and lighter blues that you see, you feel the two different hues because both of them had some spread. For the washing, I started off with our yarn mops, which are unbelievable. Like, I love the combination of all, 12 of these colors on this 200 grams of yarn. I did steam set it multiple times in between all of the different dyeing stages, which really did help it continue to be a mop to wipe the colors off of my hands. But next, I went in to our biggest potential bleeders, our pink and purple, because we've got that purple pop and fluorescent fuchsia. And I was washing with cool water and a little bit of dish soap, and thankfully, there was not bleeding. I did a little jig. I was so happy. I always worry about using too much of these colors, and we didn't have too much today. Thank goodness. But the green and blue technically also are bleeding concerns, and so, I wanted to show all of it, really, just to show things weren't bleeding. When I was done washing all of the yarn, I put it through my Laundry Alternative Nina Soft Spin Dryer to remove the liquid, so that way I could go hang it up to dry. And really, all these colors did great. It's always such a relief. I think that moving the yarn after the last little bit of dye and adding more water really does help any undissolved dye to dissolve in the water, and so that way it can bind to the yarn and we don't then have some bleeding that can happen if there was accidentally a little clump of dye that was on the corner of the yarn. But anyway, the washing went great, and now let's look at the dry yarn. Here is all of our speckled yarn, and I am really proud of this set. I like the way that the two colors on each of the colorways really does help bring that rainbow element. And I think I like this more than if I had just stuck with the neons or the brights in terms of speckling. Don't get me wrong, I would have enjoyed the others totally fine, but this gives a little bit more dimension, and Oh, well, but let's take a closer look at the yellow, because this is the color that is the most interesting. Yellow speckles are possible, as I've shown here. However, there is a lot less contrast overall between a yellow speckle and a pastel version of that same yellow, or even the bare yarn color. However, you can absolutely see a difference between our brilliant yellow and our fluorescent lemon. The difference in those yellow hues does pop, and I am very, very excited about that, even though there is overall less contrast than the other colors. If we wanted another color on here that would feel like a little bit more of a pop, using a tiny amount, and I mean probably diluted with citric acid, of say honey mustard or a more golden yellow color that would be more pigmented in the speckle, could give a little bit more pop in the way that some of the greens give a little more pop here. But I am very happy with this color. And there are definitely areas in here where you can see tinier spots of either yellow. It's just overall more subtle. And so you can imagine that if we had started off with a very pastel yellow overall and then tried to do yellow speckles on top of it, it would be very, very subtle. But people recently, to when I've been filming this, have been asking about yellow speckles. So I'm glad to have this example to highlight. One other set I would like to highlight is the difference between our red pink and our more purple colorway here. And I think that doing it this way really helps differentiate the fluorescent fuchsia and purple pop. Since purple pop breaks dramatically and overall feels very pink with some more purple specks in areas, layering on royal purple around it gives this a much more purple character. And same, the red brings this even more pink, and so it differentiates the two a little bit more than they otherwise are. In here, you can see some of the purple pop kind of speckles, and you do get a pop of darker color, and the pink is a little bit less pink. It is a little bit cooler than the fluorescent fuchsia, but it still ends up feeling very, very pink on its own. Before we go and twist up each of the mini skeins, I thought it would be worth getting just a little bit of a close peek of all of these colors. They are so fun. We dyed 6 yarn bases all in one pan, and I really, really love doing this. I love seeing how the colors turn out similar or different on the various bases. So right here we have the That Yak, the Superwash MCN High Twist, our Sparkle with Gold Stellina, Platinum DK, Titanium Sock, and Crazy 8 DK. Looking at them, I think that the speckles feel extremely similar on the different bases. Maybe some of the speckles are a little bit more blown out and a little bit less sharp on the Superwash MCN, but especially pulled back, it's not clear how much of a difference it is of maybe where the yarn was located. It looks very, very similar to the other bases. I mean, here's the Superwash MCN versus Titanium, and yeah, it's very hard to distinguish between the two, with the exception of like feel and things like that. The way the speckling looks on them is very, very similar. I talked about the yellow speckles a little bit earlier and how they're fairly subtle on white. There isn't a lot of contrast there. We have much more contrast on our That Yak base with regards to the yellow, and you can see the brilliant yellow and the fluorescent lemon both on there. There is enough contrast starting with that deeper base. I think that it would be harder to get the yellow speckles to work on a yellow base, like tone on tone. I think it would be harder to see that contrast. But if anything, I think that we almost have a bit more contrast here with the Yak than we do on, say, the Crazy 8 base that I have right here, which feels weird. Like the other colors, there's less contrast, but I think that because it's a cool toned brown or like warm toned gray type base, on the yak. The yellow is a warmth contrast as well, and so it really does pop a little bit more on there than on the white, which is a warm toned white already, like a almost more ivory yellowish toned. And so maybe that influences the way that it pops a bit. But this is glorious on the yak base and all of the others. The two yarn mops from this video are spectacular. They have each of them have all 12 colors wiped on them randomly. And the thing that really helps this work is that I did steam set the yarn a few times in between like batches and colors, because otherwise with this much color on the yarn, it would start to become more muddy and blend together versus set where I put it. So I like to have a steamer basket going and I can pop the yarn in and out as needed. The two different skeins are not identical. They were dyed at the same time in the same place, but the placement of the colors and which one got more of one color versus the other is very different and random, which adds to the fun. We all love a good yarn mop. And something like this, where I'm doing so many different layers of color, and so therefore there's so much dye on my fingers to wipe off, just comes out really extraordinary. And I am really, really proud of how it turned out. And while I can recreate this type of dye process with intent on purpose, it doesn't end up being quite the same, because when I am thinking about where I'm putting the colors versus focusing on a speckled colorway and then wiping my fingers onto our yarn, there is a difference there. And that doesn't make one better or worse or anything like that. It's just there's a difference when I'm thinking about trying to place things randomly versus I am unintentionally doing it. It's fun to see the yarn all pushed together, even if they are different bases, which you could mix together on their own. But even if you didn't want to mix them together, having multiple of these bases to create some kind of repeating rainbow is so beautiful. And man, my mind is just spinning over what I might want to do with this yarn myself. I had so much fun creating this colorway, and this was actually one of the nights that I went and dyed a whole other round of to create the SMSMS yarn sets. And so that means that we have some of those awesome yarn mops on a fingering weight base as well. And I just restocked the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, so you could go and find that yarn, plus potentially some extra yarn sets from some of the other nights of the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini series. You can find a link to my shop down in the video description. My descriptions are always filled with a bunch of handy links, including like my catering steam pans, yarn bases, and other tools and equipment I use in my videos. Some of the links are affiliate links, but I try to make it as easy as possible for you to replicate my results. This is the last mini skein dyeing night for the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini series. And I did have other ideas, but I figured I shouldn't try to make the series too long and too big. We will have more rainbows to explore, and traditionally for the June ChemKnits dye-along, I like to pick some kind of rainbow inspiration photo. So I have a feeling in live streams that will be coming up over the next few weeks, we will be exploring more of these rainbow ideas that I didn't do on mini skeins yet. I'm not sure if I'll do another full rainbow themed mini series in the future, but you know there will be more rainbow mini skein sets. I have to. I love it. They make me so happy, and I usually keep a set for myself from every series that I do because, well, I hold on to a lot of them. I'm proud of them. And this series is no exception. I think I have kept a color from almost every single night. And I don't know, I have a few different ideas of what I want to make. I may do some big epic woven thing with some of that yak. That's one of the ones I kept from this particular night. The colors have just made me so happy, and I've really been enjoying the entire process. Which of the 5 nights has been your favorite so far? Please let me know down in the comments below. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but the series is not done. Tomorrow night we will dye sock blanks and full skeins of yarn, and then we have the vlog coming up, which I don't know how long the vlog will be this year. I haven't started editing it at the time I am filming these conclusions, but I do enjoy putting these together because it's hard to keep this a secret. It's really hard for me not to share like behind the scenes along the way on social media as I'm working on these videos. And so I sort of put that energy into the vlog when I do these special events. I'm really glad I made the mini skein sets 120 grams this year instead of the traditional 5 mini skein sets I've done in the past, because that allowed me to give every color its own moment, and I wasn't having to decide, do I drop a yellow, do I drop an orange, do I drop a pink, or do I drop a purple? I mean, I suppose technically I dropped indigo along the way everywhere, but we still have something that is like fairly more fleshed out, and I'm very happy about that. But anyway, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and thank you so much for watching.